You're listening to continuing coverage in the Las Vegas reporter murder trial of Robert Tellez from the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today. Now, back to the courtroom.
Oh, is this what it is?
Everyone, please be seated. Please come to order, remain seated, court is now back in session.
Okay, does the state stipulate to the presence of the panel?
Yes, Your Honor.
And the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may begin your cross-examination.
Thank you. Ma'am, is it fair to say that DNA can be recovered from a fairly small sample?
Yes.
Blood carries a fair amount of DNA as compared to other bodily fluids, skin cells such as that.
Yes. Blood, what we consider that a biological fluid, and that does typically have more DNA present than, like you just mentioned, skin cells or something sloughing on.
Okay. When we talk about skin cells, those are epithelial cells?
They are referred to epithelial cells and or skin cells. There's cells all over our body, and within those cells is where the DNA resides. So our skin is constantly sloughing off as well.
And are you able to determine the source of the DNA that you test? And meaning, did it come from blood? Did it come from semen? Did it come from epithelial cells, saliva? Are you able to make that determination?
My analysis cannot give the source of that DNA profile.
But just so we're clear, though, is it your opinion that blood is perhaps the richest carrier of DNA? It's the best vehicle to preserve and to transport DNA.
Biological fluids, to include blood, semen, and saliva, all are good. They all contain good amounts of DNA. So we typically expect there to be a lot of DNA. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm never going to know what that profile looks like until the analysis is actually done. But biological fluids do contain more DNA.
We'll start with what's up on the overhead projector. This is State's Exhibit 149.
Okay.
You had tested, it was the rocks and the bird bath, correct?
Yes, there were rocks and various swabs, I believe, within this diagram that were submitted for forensic testing.
And so we're clear, there were no findings concerning the reference sample, that being Mr. Tellez.
For referencing that last report?
Correct.
Yes, that is correct.
Turning your attention to State's Exhibit 166. This was the clothing that was taken from the body of Mr. Gehrman. Same question. There was no DNA consistent with that of Mr. Tellez found on the shoes.
Correct. He was excluded as a contributor.
Underwear. Same question.
Same answer. Yes, he was excluded.
The shorts.
He was excluded.
The T-shirt.
Also excluded.
Turning your attention to the latter part of your testimony concerning the swabs that were obtained from the subject vehicle. Mm-hmm. You had testified that swabs were taken from the interior driver door of the vehicle. That would be impound item number 1, item number 27.
sorry, I'm just referencing my report so I don't
Please do,
speak.
yes.
I apologize. Yes, so impound item 1, yes, swabbed from the interior driver door handle pull, yes.
There was, number 1, a negative presumptive blood test, correct?
Correct.
So there was no presumptive, there was a negative test on the presumptive blood test from that item number 27, impound item number 1, correct?
That is correct. It was a negative presumptive test for blood.
As to impound item number 2, and that would be item number 28 from the lab item, that was taken from the driver's seatbelt and the buckle from the vehicle, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Again, there was a negative presumptive blood finding.
That is correct.
And again, no DNA.
For item 28, lab item 28, DNA profile was obtained, but as I mentioned earlier, assuming Robert Tellis, that foreign component was too limited.
And again, concerning Mr. Garriman, there was no DNA found concerning, from the reference sample that you had concerning Mr. Garriman, correct?
Correct. I didn't even compare Jeffrey Garriman's DNA to lab item 28 because the remainder, after I assumed Robert Tellis, the remainder is too limited. So there actually was no comparisons, but yes.
In reference to lab item number 29, impound item number 3, swab from the steering wheel, again, negative presumptive blood test.
That is correct, yes.
And again, no findings of any meaning in reference to DNA concerning Mr. Garriman.
Correct. He was uninformative, as I talked about earlier, for that sample.
Turning your attention to item number 30, that's the lab item, impound item number 4, the swab from the gear shifter of the vehicle, negative presumptive blood test.
Correct, yes.
And again, no DNA of any significance concerning Mr. Garriman.
Correct. For lab item 30, the foreign component was too limited, so he wasn't even compared to that item.
Turning your attention to item number 31, that's the lab item, impound item number 5, the swab from the gas pedal of the subject vehicle. Again, negative presumptive blood test.
That is correct, yes.
And again, in reference to the DNA sample, nothing for any meaningful comparisons.
Yes, for lab item 31, the sample as a whole was too limited, so there were no further interpretations.
Turning your attention to lab item number 32, impound item number 6. This is the swab from the brake pedal versus the gas pedal. Negative presumptive blood test.
That is correct, yes.
And again, no meaningful findings concerning DNA contributors.
Correct. For that item of evidence, lab item 32, Jeffrey Garriman was uninformative.
Lab item number 33, impound item number 7, the swab for the interior front passenger handle door. Again, negative presumptive blood test.
Correct.
And again, we don't have Mr. Garriman's DNA or any findings of any significance concerning Mr. Garriman.
Correct. He was excluded as a contributor.
Lab item number 34, impound item number 9, that was a swab from the interior rear driver door handle pulled from the vehicle. Again, negative presumptive blood test.
That is correct, yes.
And no meaningful DNA findings concerning Mr. Garriman.
Correct. That profile as a whole was limited, so there were no comparisons to it.
Turn your attention to State's Exhibit 285, this straw hat.
Okay.
No, just so we're clear, no presumptive blood tests of any significance. Nothing was conducted, actually, but please.
So for the straw hat, referencing my report, excuse me, the pieces were impounded separately, and at the time this item was screened or examined, excuse me, there were a few areas that were screened for blood. They were all negative presumptive blood tests.
And again, same question concerning the sample reference to Mr. Garriman, nothing. You
Correct.
said there was a mixture of 5 or more.
Yes.
It was complex, but nothing felt, there's blood or there's a finding or epithelial cells concerning Mr. Garriman.
Correct. Item 20.1, there was no testing for presumptive blood for that sample. And as I mentioned earlier, it was too complex, so there were no comparisons made to that sample.
Turning your attention to State's Exhibit 272. This is the partial right shoe.
Okay.
No findings of DNA concerning the reference sample taken from Mr. Gehrman.
That is correct. For that sample, was excluded. Jeffrey Gehrman was excluded.
Turning your attention to State's Exhibit 263. Left shoe. As far as the presumptive blood test, negative.
Referencing lab items, so the left shoe is referenced for lab items 13 and 14. Both of those were negative presumptive blood tests.
And again, in reference to the sample from Mr. Gehrman, negative. Concerning the DNA.
Correct. He was
Excluded.
excluded, yes. And he was excluded from lab item 13, and actually lab item 14 was not taken forward for analysis.
Showing you what's been marked and admitted as State's Exhibit 274. In reference to the DNA reference sample from Mr. Gehrman, excluded, not included. There's no DNA from Mr. Gehrman found on these pieces.
Yes, I believe that is most likely the lab item 16 swab from piece of black, white, and gray rubber. And yes, you are correct. Jeffrey Gehrman was excluded.
State's Exhibit 261. These were the scissors. There was presumptive blood concerning the handles, correct?
Excuse
Top
me.
and bottom.
Yes, the scissors reference lab items 17 and 18. They were initially identified as AB5 and AB6. Both of those were positive presumptive for apparent blood, for blood.
But when compared to the sample reference taken from Mr. Gehrman, excluded.
Yes.
I'm showing you what's been marked and admitted. I can anticipate your answers, but I want to just show you this. This is a bag found from the residence of Mr. Tellis. Was anything submitted to you to perform an analysis, either presumptive blood or DNA?
For this bag, no.
Based upon your working with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, would you assume that had there been a presumptive finding, I would have been submitted for further analysis?
Those sorts of decisions are made outside of the purview of my job, so that would be dependent upon the requesting detective or officer who submitted it. So there was nothing that was submitted, so I don't have an answer for that. Unfortunately, I don't know why, yes or no.
Fair enough, but as far as to your review of the documents, there's no presumptive blood tests that were conducted upon that bag, correct?
I did not review crime scenes report, so if there was, I don't know.
And again, you were never called upon to render an opinion as to any DNA evidence found upon this bag?
Correct. There was no samples from that bag or the bag itself that were submitted for analysis. What was submitted is what has been discussed today.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Did you say no?
No, I'm sorry.
All right, thank you very much for your testimony here today. You may step down if you're excused from your subpoena. Thank you very much for being here. You may call your next witness.
Dan Cullen.
Please step up into the witness stand. Remain standing. Raise your right hand. Face the clerk.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated. Please state and spell your first and last name for the record.
Daniel Kulin, Daniel Kulin.
May I proceed, Your Honor? Good morning, sir.
Hi.
Hi. Sir, where were you working back in 2022?
Clark County Communications Office.
And what is the Clark County Communications Office responsible for?
Handling requests from the media and other communications efforts for the county.
Okay, so occasionally members of the media may request information from the county and it's done through the communications office?
Yes.
Are those called public records requests?
They can be, yeah.
Okay, that's one form of them. And so, oh,
Yes,
sorry.
I'm
thank-
sorry.
Thank you, Your Honor. So if you were a member of the media and you wanted to make a public records request, would you go or contact the communications office, or what would the procedure be?
So you would probably call and talk to us about it, and then depending on what the request is, you could also submit an email to kind of put it in writing.
Okay, and are those types of requests, or I guess I should say, did your office receive, when you were working there, several requests or many requests from various reporters on a range of topics?
Yes, frequently.
Was one of those requesters a reporter by the name of Jeff Gehrman?
Yes,
And I think you said they could call or they could email a request to the office?
yes.
Once the communications office receives the request, what happens with that request on the county side?
Well, it depends what they're requesting. So, for example, if they're asking for an email search, the procedure would be to communicate that request to the DA's office as well as IT department, the department, and the individuals that are the subject of the request also, and then to proceed to collect the information.
Okay, so if I did a request or a reporter did a request for emails of, I would assume this would be county employees. Is that yes?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. Your office or where you were working back then would receive the request, is that correct?
Correct.
And then the request, you said, would go to the DA's office?
Correct.
And I assume that's the civil division of the DA's office, not the criminal division?
Correct.
And then you said the IT department, is that right?
Yes.
Because I assume that's the department that's going to collect email or electronic data?
Correct.
And then your office would be in the mix on that as well?
Correct. We facilitate the request, serve as the person or the office that's in communication with the reporters.
And then the person whose email is being requested, are they notified, hey, there's been a public records request for your email?
Yes.
And that notification would be made by the communications office usually?
Typically, yes.
Okay. And I assume then the IT department gathers whatever might be the subject of the request?
Correct.
And then what happens to the data that they gather?
So let's say that it was a request for emails. Once the IT folks have collected all of the potentially relevant documents, they would get reviewed by DA Civil and the communications office to be prepared to be released to the reporter.
Okay. And are there occasions when the civil division of the DA's office may hold back a record or refuse to produce a record for various reasons?
Correct.
After that, are the records that are going to be produced given to the subject of the request?
Yes,
And then they're allowed to review them before they go out to, say, the reporter?
they could.
Okay. And then after that, I assume they're released to the reporters?
Correct.
Are there numerous requests going through the communications office all the time?
Yes, there were when I was there.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach, I've shown Mr. Draskovich what's been marked as 339 and 340. Thank you. Sir, I'm going to show you States Exhibits 339 and 340. Do you recognize those two documents?
Yes, these are emails that we received or
Okay.
that I sent.
With respect to 340, that appears to be an email from Jeff Gehrman, is that correct?
Correct.
And that appears to be a request for public records, is that correct?
Yes.
And then with respect to 339, those look like an email and then a response to an email, is that fair?
Correct.
And you're the sender of the email and then you receive an email back, is that correct?
Yes.
State moves to admit 339 and 340.
No objection.
May I publish these, Your Honor? Thank you. I'm putting on the overhead what's been admitted as 340. That looks a little right. Are you able to see that on your screen there?
Yes.
Okay. It looks like it's an email from Jeff Gehrman of the Review Journal. Is that fair?
Yes.
And the date is July 13th, 2022?
Correct.
And it was sent to Eric Papa.
Yes.
Do you know who that is?
Yes.
Who is that?
He was or is another staff member in the communications office. He was the director, or
Okay.
is the director, sorry.
And it appears that Mr. Gehrman says this is an open records request for all emails between Public Administrator Robert Tellis and Estate Coordinator Roberta Lee Kennett from January 1st of 22 to the date that the request is fulfilled. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And he also is requesting communications, including between Tellis and Lee Kennett on Microsoft Teams for that same date span.
Yes.
What is Microsoft Teams?
It's a computer program that allows you to send messages between
Is it
people.
similar to email or it's?
Yes.
Okay. And then it looks like please also provide all text messages between Tellis and Lee Kennett on their office and personal phones for that same date time period. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then, as a reminder, he wrote, as you know, state law requires a response to open records requests within 5 business days. And then please call me if you have if there's a cost associated with it. Is that all correct?
Correct.
Do you remember this request coming through the communications office back in July of 22?
Yes.
And so would this request have followed that same procedure that you described where once this request came in, it would be forwarded on to IT to collect that electronic data?
Correct.
Also to the civil department of the county to see if they wanted to object to any part of it?
Yeah, correct.
And then also it would have been, the fact that the request had been made would have been conveyed to Mr. Tellis and Miss Lee Kennett?
Correct. And in addition, he's asking for things that might not be in our possession, so we would reach out to the subjects of the request so that they have an opportunity to provide anything that we might not have.
Okay. Now, I'm going to put on the overhead, and would those be the text messages from
Correct.
phones? Okay. I'm now putting on the overhead states 339. And we'll start with, that's you sending an email on August the 8th of 22, is that correct?
Correct.
And you send an email to Mr. Tellis, looks like at almost 2 o'clock.
Correct.
And you say, Mr. Tellis, we've received a request from the Review Journal for emails between you and Michael Murphy from May 15th to July 13th, and between you and Rita Reed for those same dates. The reporter has also requested emails between you and Roberta Lee Kennett from January 1st to July 13th, as well as Microsoft Teams between the two of you. Those requests are in addition to text messages for that same time period. So you send out a notification that to Mr. Tellis on August the 8th that this request was made? Correct. Now, the request that we looked at just earlier from Mr. Gehrman, his emailed request, this email suggests that he was seeking additional communications from Mr. Murphy and Rita Reed. Are reporters allowed to call in and I guess adjust the request and say, well, I'm looking for more than what I emailed you?
That's possible, sure.
Okay. And it's, I guess what I'm saying is they don't have to fill out a form and be exact. They can just contact the office either by email or form and say, this is what I want.
That's correct, generally speaking. I mean, we worked a lot with Jeff over the years. So.
Okay. And did you actually know him personally?
Yes.
And had you worked with him prior to your working at the county?
Yes, we were reporters together at the Las Vegas Sun.
Okay. So you were, friends with him, or at least acquaintances, or maybe more than that?
Yes.
Okay. And would the communication between the county office and the reporters, especially ones that were frequent or that you knew, that was a pretty informal back and forth?
Yes,
Okay. And then it's, after the request is made, that's where the civil department of the county weighs in and decides legally what they're going to produce or not produce?
correct, before anything's turned over.
Okay. And then I'm just sort of going back to our Exhibit 339. It looks like you receive a response from Mr. Tellis on that same date saying that I'd like to review those communications prior to them being sent. Please advise as to when I might be able to do so. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that is part of the procedure that the county follows with regard to producing electronic data for reporters?
Correct.
The subject could review them.
When I was there, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. I'll pass the witness.
Cross-examination?
Yes. So turning your attention to State's Exhibit 340. This was the initial request that your attention was drawn to, the July 13th, 2022 request from Mr. Gehrman. You were to comply with this request within how many days?
We would communicate with the requester within 5 days and let them know how long it might take to respond.
And presumably upon receiving this notice from Mr. Gehrman on July 13th, you would have notified Mr. Tellis.
At some point, we would have notified him. The initial steps typically would be to communicate with the reporter to make sure that we're all understanding what they're looking for and see if there's anything that they would like to change or amend.
Do we have any emails from you to Mr. Gehrman right around the 5-day period from July 13th, 2022, being the starting point?
I would have to search for those. I don't know right now.
Okay, but that would generally be your policy.
Well, it could be communication, we could be calling him or we could
Absolutely.
be emailing him.
And obviously, at this point in time, there was nothing out of the ordinary. You testified previously that you'd communicated with Mr. Gehrman before when he would request for records.
Correct.
So in this case, it was just the basically standard procedure. You receive a request, you communicate it to the person whose communications are being sought, and then you respond to Mr. Gehrman. Fair to say?
Well, it's more likely that we would communicate with the reporter first to make sure that we are, getting him or her what they want. For example, he's asking for, communications through the date that the request is filled.
Yes.
We probably would have, or I probably would have called Jeff and asked him to, identify an end date, a specific end date.
And it's safe to assume that you did that.
It's likely, yes.
And then following that communication based upon your testimony, you would have communicated this request to Mr. Tellis.
Yes, at some point in the process, we would communicate to the subjects of the request.
In reference to the communication, the second communication that we have in writing on August 8th, again, we have a large request. He's asking for a broader scope of communications. The initial request was between Mr. Tellis and Ms. Lee Kennett, correct?
The email that you just showed?
Yes,
Correct.
the 13th. Yes?
Correct.
Okay. This request concerns communication between other individuals.
Correct.
In this point, we obviously have, it's safe to assume that you had spoken with Mr. Gehrman and now you're speaking with Mr. Tellis, correct?
Correct.
But digitally speaking with him. You sent an email.
Correct.
And his request to review these is normal course, nothing out of the ordinary.
It's not something that every subject of a request asks for, but it's not unheard of.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
No,
Your Honor, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony here today. You may step down.
I have one question.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're gonna stay right here for a minute. We have a question from a juror. What do we have to Okay, we have a question from a juror. It's been marked as court's exhibit number 14. Do you recall how many times Gehrman requested communications through you directly, and how often, weekly, monthly?
Yeah, I couldn't give you an exact number, but Jeff was an investigative reporter, and so it was common for him to reach out and make public records requests. But I wouldn't be able to give you an exact number without researching it.
Okay, it's been marked and made part of the record as court's exhibit 14. Does the state have any follow-up?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Does the defense?
Yes. In reference to these requests, in other cases, you would have individuals assert a privilege or somehow try and bar the transference of the communications.
The subjects of the request?
Yes.
I can't recall specific instances of that occurring, but yes, that is something that has occurred. I'm not aware of it being successful, though.
And in reference to these requests that were made by Mr. Gehrman, there were no objections or any attempts by Mr. Tellez to stop the transference of his communications, correct?
I don't recall.
Maybe?
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony here today. You may step down, and you're excused from your subpoena. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you.
State may call their next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Roberta Lee Kennett.
Please watch your step. And if you'll remain standing, raise your right hand, face the clerk, please.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? You may be seated. Please state and spell your first and last name for the record.
My name is Roberta Lee Kennett. It's ROBERTA LEE-KENNETT.
May I proceed, Your Honor? Do you want me to call you Ms. Lee Kennett or Ms. Kennett?
Lee Kennett's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Lee Kennett, were you ever employed at the Public Administrator's Office?
Yes, I was.
And I'm sorry, but you have a soft voice. Can you just keep it up a little bit or
Sure.
pull that maybe a little closer?
Yes, I was.
Thank you. Do you remember what year it was that you started working there?
I've been with the county 12, 13 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that your first job at the county?
I worked for the public guardian's office first.
Public guardians and then public administrators?
Yep, a few years after that.
Okay. When you started working at the public administrator's office,
Yeah.
who was the elected public administrator at that time?
That would have been John Cahill.
Okay. At some point, Mr. Cahill decides not to be the public administrator, and a new one comes in. Is that fair?
Yep.
And who was that?
Robert Tejas.
Okay. And you looked over at council table. Do you see him in the courtroom?
Yes.
Could you describe an article of clothing and point to him, please?
He's in a suit right there.
like on?
Gray suit.
We'll stipulate for
Thank
that.
you. Thank you. What was your job title at the Public Administrator's Office?
Estate coordinator 2.
And as an estate coordinator, can you just give the members of the jury like an idea of what your responsibilities were, what you did?
It was our responsibility to administer probates, estates assigned to us.
Okay, estates assigned to you. And some people may have familiarity with that. Did that involve houses of people that maybe died with not immediate heirs?
It would be decedents who had any property, personal, real, anything that needed to be administered through the probate process. It was our job to either sell or basically you want to end up with income at the end of the probate process so that you have a distribution for heirs or beneficiaries.
Okay.
So,
And so it would be sort of handling what's
what's
left
handling what's left of the person, right?
to
who
give to
passed.
their heirs.
Correct.
And then that position that you had was called estate coordinator?
Coordinator, correct.
Were you the only estate coordinator, or are there more than one in the office?
I was not the only one, there were more.
Okay. Did some of that estate coordination involve you maybe meeting with people fixing up houses or people in real estate?
Yeah, if a decedent had real property and that needed to be administered through the probate process, sold, fixed up, yes, we would have to partake in that.
Okay. So sometimes you would be going out to houses and walking through them, working with people that maybe worked on the houses in order
Working with
to
the
sell.
vendors, correct, yes.
Okay. Now, you indicated that Mr. Tellis came in as the public administrator at some point, kind of succeeding Mr. Cahill. Mm-hmm. Is that yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you remember what year that was?
I think it was 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could it have been 2019?
Oh, I honestly don't remember what
That's
year
okay.
that was.
That's okay. When he came into the office, you were working still there.
Yes.
Did he implement certain changes about how yourself and other employees could go about their work?
Yeah, there were lots of changes.
And were those changes well received by all of the employees, or were they kind of divisive?
We were very divisive on them.
Okay. At some point, would you have considered yourself friends with Mr. Tellis?
At some point, I mean, sure, not in the beginning, but
Yeah.
sure.
Over time,
Over
did you
time.
develop a friendship?
Yes.
I want to kind of move to May of 2022.
Okay.
Did you become aware that reporter Jeff Garriman was possibly writing a story that would have included information about you?
Yes.
Who told you that Mr. Garriman was writing that story?
Rob did.
And by Rob, you mean Mr. Tellis?
Robert Tellis, yes.
Did he give you contact information for Mr. Garriman
Yes.
to call him?
Yes.
Did you talk to Mr. Garriman?
I did.
And was that a brief conversation?
Very brief.
Okay. Do you remember in May of 22 if Mr. Garriman ever came to the public administrator's office?
He did.
And what was his purpose in coming there?
Just to actually see the office, and I know Rob invited him over to take a look and see what was going on in the office.
Okay. And so Mr. Garriman was present in the office at some point in May of 22?
Correct.
And that was at Mr. Tellis's invitation?
Correct.
And do you know if Mr. Tellis sat for an interview?
It was on TV, but yes.
Okay. Was there, to your knowledge, a news story that followed that interview?
Yes.
And what was Rob's reaction to that news story?
I don't think any of us were happy about that news story.
You were not happy.
Yes.
I guess I should say it this way. Were you happy about the news story?
I was upset, embarrassed, and relieved all at the same time, I think.
Okay. Upset, embarrassed, and relieved. What was Mr. Tellis's reaction?
I would assume upset.
Did he ever talk to you about that story?
Yes, we talked about that story.
What did he say about it?
He was not happy about it.
Okay. What were his feelings about Mr. Gehrman?
He did not like Mr. Gehrman.
Did you ever describe it as stronger than dislike?
Like hate?
Hated
I
him?
would assume he hated him.
Did he ever tell you he hated him?
Yes.
He had said that? I assume that was after the story was written?
Yes.
Were there other stories besides that first one that followed?
Yeah, there were a lot of stories that followed.
And in those succeeding stories, I assume, did Mr. Tellis's feelings about Mr. Gehrman change, or did it sort of stay in that negative hate space?
I honestly don't know if his feelings changed about it. I just think they were terrible stories, intentional stories. So
Okay.
it ruined his career, right? It ruined his chances.
I'm sorry?
It ruined his chances to run. So I would
Okay.
assume he'd be upset.
And by that, you're saying at the time, Mr. Tellis was running in a primary for public administrator,
Right.
and those stories were published. Is that fair?
Yes.
And then Mr. Tellis lost the primary,
Yes.
meaning he wouldn't be public administrator the following year.
Correct.
After Mr. Tellis lost that primary, let me ask you this. When he lost the primary, did he lose the primary to someone who was already working at the public administrator's office?
Yes, Rita Reed.
And was that one of the employees that was kind of against his changes?
Yes.
After he lost that primary, did he come to the office?
Not as much, no.
Okay. Was he like working from home or staying away?
Working from home, he'd come in and sign checks or sign legal documents.
Okay. Did he ever express concern about Mr. Gehrman writing another article?
No.
Did you ever hear, like you said, he had said that he hated Mr. Gehrman. Were you two communicating much after he loses the primary?
Not very much, no.
Okay, and that's because he was primarily working from home or coming
Correct.
in? Did you ever know Mr. Tellis to respond to things Mr. Gehrman had written on social media?
I'm so sorry. Can you repeat that?
Sure. Were you ever aware of whether Mr. Tellis responded to stuff Mr. Gehrman had written on social media?
Yes.
And it was called Twitter back then?
Correct.
Did you have a feeling about whether or not he should do that?
Yeah, I told him to stop.
And did you just think that was going to cause more problems?
I just felt like the more you were responding with Mr. Gehrman, the more articles that were going to come out for no reason.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So after Mr. Tellis loses the primary, that's in June, is that correct?
Sure, I don't remember.
Okay, that's okay.
No.
Sometime after that, do you become aware that Mr. Gehrman has now made another public records request?
Yes.
And I assume it's after the primary.
Correct.
And that's for communications between yourself and Mr. Tellis?
Yep, and then also between Rita Reed and Mr. Mike Murphy.
Okay. And did the county notify you that, hey, you're going to, this request has been made for your emails and that sort of
Yes,
thing?
yeah. Communication, the director of communications or another representative from Clark County sent me an email about it.
Okay. And then I want to now move forward to Labor Day weekend of 2022. So this will be September. Do you recall if you went into work at all on that Friday of Labor Day weekend?
I did. I went into work on Friday. I had found out the week prior that I was getting to transfer to Clark County Social Services, where I work now. And so I had over 60-some cases assigned to me that I had to complete case statuses on for the next person who was going to receive that assignment. So I went in with the intent of overtime to work on those case statuses. And I saw an email from the communications department asking us to review these emails that were going to be sent forth to Gehrman. So I ended up that morning requesting overtime for that instead of doing my case statuses.
Okay.
So yes.
I've shown both these exhibits to Mr. Draskevich, Your Honor. May I approach the witness? Ms. Lee Kennett, I'm showing you what's been marked as states 341 and 342. 341 is just a calendar, just so we can talk about when we're talking, or when I'm asking you questions, and that appears to be a calendar for September 2022, correct?
Yes.
And then, 342, it's redacted, but it appears to be an email to yourself and Mr. Tellis.
Okay.
And it's from September 1st, is that correct?
Okay, yeah.
State moves to admit 341 and 342.
No objection.
I'm going to put on the overhead states 341, which is our calendar. And I think you said that you went into work on the Friday before Labor Day weekend in order to catch up on some past casework.
To complete case statuses, not catch up, but case statuses for when I moved on.
Okay. And so that would have been on Friday the 2nd?
Correct.
And I don't need to know the exact time, but did you go in the morning, or when would you have been there?
Yeah, in the morning, 7, 8 a.m. I don't remember. I'm sure Human Resources will have my
Yeah, because you would have had to log in on a computer.
Correct.
But you said that you saw an email with regard to the messages that were going to be released.
Correct.
What was your understanding of the date they were going to be released?
I had no idea when they were going to be released.
Okay. Did you feel that there was some urgency for you to go through them on the Friday?
I believe there was a deadline of when they had to be reviewed by.
Okay.
So yeah, there was urgency.
Okay. And so instead of doing your work, you start going through this group of messages that may be released to the reporter.
Correct.
And that's all on the 2nd.
That's correct.
Now I'm putting on the overhead 342. And does that appear to be an email? I mean, it's sent at 5:45 p.m. on the 1st, so you would have seen that email on
Friday, because I leave work normally 5 p.m.
So
the
you
day
would have
before. I didn't see it on Thursday. Correct.
Okay, so you received the email about the messages, but you don't see it until Friday, right?
Correct.
So the email is sent out on Thursday. Hey, go through the messages, and then you go in on Friday and start going through the messages.
Correct.
Okay. Now, did you ever talk to Mr. Tellis about the group of messages that were going to be released?
After I had reviewed them, I had created like a Word document advising him what concerns of some of the emails exchanges. My concerns were about some of our vendors named in there. And that was it. I actually said, I really don't care what was in here. There doesn't appear to be anything beyond the name of one of our vendors that I had concerns with.
Okay. Yep. Did he raise any concerns to you about what was in the group?
He did not.
Okay. So you sent him, is it fair to say, like a Word document
Correct.
by email to say, these are the things I'm worried about?
Correct.
Okay. After that, do you do anything with regard to those messages?
No.
I assume at some point you leave work on that Friday?
Correct.
And you go home, and I'm just going to put on the overhead 341. You go home, and I assume at some point you see some news broadcasts about Jeff Gehrman?
Saturday morning, because it was my intent to go back into the office that whole weekend to complete my case statuses. So I wake up, I look at local news every morning while I'm getting ready. I saw on Twitter, or X, whatever, an article about Gehrman being murdered.
Okay.
And so that freaked me out, yes.
And once you learn of that on the news, do you have communications between yourself and Mr. Tellis about the fact that Mr. Gehrman had been murdered?
Yes, I had reached out and said something to the fact like, oh my gosh, Mr. Gehrman's been murdered. Sent him a copy of the screenshot of that and said I was not going to go into work anymore.
Okay. And was that just because you were a little bit concerned about your safety?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
And Mr. Draskevich, this is 343. May I approach, Your Honor? Ms. Lee Kinnan, I'm showing you what's been marked states 343. I know you probably don't recognize the type of document it is, but do these appear to be text messages between yourself and Mr. Tellis?
Right, yeah, from that morning, yep.
Okay, in fact, I gave you a copy of
Right.
this a few days ago for you to review.
Right,
And so this is a fair representation of your communications?
yes.
State moves to omit 343.
No objection.
I'm turning to the, excuse me, the second page of the, the third page of the document. And it appears to be a text from you, right?
Yes,
And it's from 9/4/2022, and it looks like it's at a little after 7 a.m. And
Right.
you're saying, oh my goodness, Jeff Gehrman died.
yep.
And it looks, just from the punctuation, like that was surprising to you.
Absolutely.
And I think you said that you sent screenshots of the
Of that
articles.
article.
This is on page 4. It looks like there's a communication on 9/4, same date, and it looks like you send a screenshot to Mr. Tellis of like communication on social media. Is that fair?
Yep,
And the second message appears to be, we have a bigger version of it, but a
I can't see
screenshot of
it.
the article. Is that yes?
sure, yes.
Okay.
I can't see it, so.
Yeah, I actually have a
Just
bigger
assuming.
version. I'm
Okay.
one step behind you. So does that look like a readable version of the screenshot of what you saw on social media about Mr. Gehrman's death?
Sure.
And then,
Yeah, that's what I thought I sent, yes.
okay. So those were sent to Mr. Tellis.
Correct.
And his response, this is on page 5 of the document. It's kind of focusing. His response to you is, holy shit.
Yeah, yes.
And you actually respond.
It's all over Twitter.
It's all over Twitter.
Correct.
So then do you communicate with him your concern about going into work?
Yes,
And so you, I think if I'm understanding you, you opt not to go into work that day?
absolutely not, correct. I stayed home.
Okay. I want to move on. This is page 34 of the documents. And it looks like, are you able to read that up there from you? Yeah, I'll brighten it. Let me zoom in a little. So this is a communication, it looks like, from you to Mr. Tellis on
Okay.
9/6 of 2022.
Okay.
And it looks like you write, have you received a response from Jeff or the DA? Just wondering.
Okay.
Do you know what that's in regard to?
I do not remember. I'm just looking at that. I don't.
Okay. Do you think it was in regard to the records? Or do you not remember?
I don't even remember what Jeff I'm talking about on there, or the DA. Probably, yeah, our DA for Clark County.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't remember.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't remember a lot.
That's okay. But, I mean, fair to say that's what that text says.
Sure, yeah.
And the only DA, I mean, like, the DA that you would have been interacting with would be like the DA civil? who was-
For public
those-
administrators, correct.
Okay, dealing with those messages?
Right.
Okay. And then this is page 36. And it is from 9/6 of 22. And you send a message, Rob, WTF,
Yeah.
please do not be driving your Yukon around for a while.
Correct.
What had you seen that made you send that message to him?
I think what everyone else saw, that Yukon in the photos
You mean
or
the,
in media,
yeah, the media messages that
Right.
Metro sent out?
right?
of a car associated with Mr. Gehrman's murder?
Correct.
And had you known Mr. Tellis to have a similar Yukon?
He had driven it to work a few times. I believe it's his wife's vehicle.
Okay.
Yes.
And so you're kind of like, whoa, don't drive your car around for a while.
Yes.
And then his response is, that's crazy?
Okay, yes.
Is that fair?
Yep.
And it looks like, this is page 37, you say,
Yep.
please tell me your Yukon is not that color.
Correct.
You wrote that.
Correct.
And this is page 38. He says, it is similar if not the same.
Correct.
And you ask him another detail, do you have racks on yours too, meaning the...
Right, from the photos, right?
Okay. And this is page 39. What do you say?
Please tell me you don't.
Okay, and then
I'm freaking out, Rob.
and are you starting to get nervous?
Yeah, I'm starting to suspect.
Okay. And then this is page 40. He says, yeah, I think so. It's fine. I didn't do it.
Right?
And then you ask another question about his tires.
Right, you don't have special rims, do you?
Okay. And then this is page 41, tell him I am, and then...
Very worried. Correct.
And you then say, what?
I say, it's not you, but they could try to use the vehicle as a way to suspect you.
And then his response is, my car has all matching wheel patterns.
Okay?
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then this is page 43. You seem kind of bewildered. You say, I don't understand.
Correct.
And then you say,
Your rims look like the photo.
and this is page 44. He answers you, I think they are saying that the front does not match the back.
Correct.
And then you say,
F, your car is identical.
okay.
Yeah.
So you kind of communicate with him back and forth, fair to say, based on what you saw
Right.
from the Metro release of the vehicle.
That's correct.
Okay. And those are contained in these text messages that we discussed.
Yes.
Do you know what Trillion is?
Yes.
What is that?
For me, it was just an instant messaging app.
Okay, like Snapchat or something like that?
Correct.
Did you install that ever on your phone?
I had.
And who asked you to install it on your phone, or?
Rob?
Rob Tellis? Mm-hmm. Is that yes? Sorry.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you installed it?
Yes.
Did you two communicate through Trillion?
We had. Yes.
Court's indulgence. Thank you, ma'am. I'll pass the witness, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
I do have cross-examination. What time was Your Honor wanting to take?
How long do you think you'll be?
It could be a little bit.
Okay, all right, so we will break for lunch at this time. During this recess, you're admonished not to discuss or communicate with anyone, including your fellow jurors, in a way regarding the case or its merits, either by voice, phone, email, text, internet, or other means of communication or social media. Read, watch, or listen to any news or media accounts or commentary about the case. Do any research, consult dictionaries, internet, or reference materials. Do any investigation, test a theory, recreate any aspect of the case, or in any other way investigate or learn about the case on your own, or form or express any opinion regarding the case till it's finally submitted to you. And we'll be in recess till, let's see, 1:15. Thank you.
Thank you. All rise for the next jury, please. Jurors.
More continuing coverage in the Las Vegas Reporter murder trial of Robert Tellez is on the way. From the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today, press subscribe now.